Good morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I'm your moderator, John North. My colleague, John Becker, is away this morning. Hope you're having a good last Sunday of the month. We are hot and heavy into election season, and hot and heavy, or at least heavy, in terms of the special legislative session. So we've got a couple things we want to talk to you about. First, we're going to welcome our guest this morning. It's Chris Davis. He's the Knox County Elections Administrator, and he's going to talk about the election that we've got going on. More about that in a second. I'm delighted to welcome our panelists, our regulars, our good friends. And so let me introduce them. We've got Susan Richardson-Williams, who runs her own PR company and is a Republican. Susan?
Good morning, John.
I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you.
And Don Bosch, who is a Democrat and a lawyer in this town of Knox. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm stable.
Stable. Great.
If I have a breakdown and start coughing, everybody forgive me.
A little, because we explain how we make the sausage around here too. Susan wasn't feeling so hot. She's better today. So everybody, sit at home, cross your fingers, and keep the cough drops handy. All right. Chris, we wanted to talk about the City of Knoxville election. That is what we have going on. The City of Knoxville does this by design. They don't have elections during, when other folks do, like state and congressional. So we are in the middle of it. We wrapped up early voting. We want to talk to you about that. And then we have the election coming up this Tuesday. Polls open 8 to 8. I'd like to, you sent out some numbers. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, your impressions about the early voting turnout, which we had wrap up last week, what you think about it, and what you're guessing for Tuesday?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on the show.
Our pleasure.
We had about 8,800 total voters, including early voting and absentee, through the first 14 days. And frankly, when you look at the fact that there are 102, almost 103,000 registered voters in the city of Knoxville, that frankly is very disappointing to me. We had relatively good weather for 2 weeks. We had 6 early voting spots for the first time ever, I think, in a city primary election, so we had more options for voters. Obviously, the 2 Saturdays, the 3 days open till 7 o'clock at night, so it's hard for me to have a city voter look at me and say, I really couldn't get to the polls, and now they basically have 12 hours on election day. So I would term, just to be blunt, voting was lackluster, frankly. I hope turnout is much better on election day. Certainly, from an election administrator standpoint, I like lots of numbers because generally speaking, that means bigger margins. I don't like one-vote elections. I don't like tie elections like we had back in 2017. Those do not cause me to sleep well.
We don't want to see the coin toss.
That does happen.
We do not like those. So I'm hoping that voters take advantage of that 12-hour period we have on Tuesday.
Yes, indeed. Well, we would hope so, too. You've told me, and our panelists are going to jump in with questions, but you've told me in the past sort of a rule of thumb that you go by is what you see as your early voting, then you sort of kind of expect to see that similar number maybe on the actual election day itself. Is that, you still feel that way?
Generally speaking, in city elections, sometimes it'll be 55% early voting, 45% election day. A couple times in the last 20 years, we've had it where it's 45% election day and 55% early, or vice versa. But ultimately, we had 8,800. We'll probably have another couple hundred absentee ballots returned, so somewhere around 8,200 total for that period.
Right.
If we get 9,000 to 13,000 on election day,
Tuesday.
I think despite the fact that's only 20% of the electorate, that's probably a good turnout. It's about, I think, what we can expect on election day. Obviously, it's about a 20% chance of rain. It's the type of thing I look at. But we'll see how it turns out. I think, frankly, the candidates, I can tell the last couple of days have done a little better job of getting out and knocking on doors, making phone calls. But ultimately, we need everybody who can vote to get out and vote.
City election. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask how it compares to like the last mayoral race
4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago, where we did not obviously have an incumbent on the ballot. We're down about 1,000 voters total from early voting, and in that particular election, we had right between 19 and 20,000 voters vote for basically the November election. You'll remember was between Eddie Manis and India Kincannon, and I believe there were 1 or 2 more candidates that were in the primary, which is what we're talking about. And so, with an incumbent, no incumbent, on the ballot, we only had 19,000. So I'm hoping with an incumbent, we get to at least that 19,000. I would like to see 20 to 21 if we can.
So, Chris, it seems that not just this 4-year cycle, this election, but in all of our elections, there's really been a slide where the early vote is increasing. I remember when we first started early voting, we were looking at numbers like 20% of the vote or 25%. Now we're looking at a majority. Do you think that trend is going to continue? And if so, do we look at trying to find ways to expand opportunities to early vote?
You know, I hope it does. I'll be honest with you. I think Knox County, and you can look at the numbers, does as well as any county in the state of Tennessee. We're always in the top 3 or 4 in terms of the percent of our voters that vote early. That's what we want. It makes for easier election days. It makes for shorter lines. It makes for less angry people who can't find a parking spot on election day, or somebody took the disability parking, or we had to stand in line for 2 hours and it poured rain, those types of things. So I think early voting will continue to trend. But then if you look back, and I know we're not talking about county elections, but you look at our most recent county election, we had the biggest election day back in November of 2022 that we've had in 10 years.
That's right.
That includes 3 presidentials, and the biggest midterm in 16 years, and that was with not a particularly exciting ballot.
But there was the Dobbs decision.
No doubt.
That really, one of those rare times where local politics really became federal.
Absolutely.
And as versus federal politics are all local, as we used to say, or a version thereof.
Right.
So
I think the fact that we actually had 6 early voting spots as opposed to 5 disappoints me a little bit, that we didn't have a little greater turnout. I can tell you, just a little sneak peek for those folks out there watching at home upcoming for March, we're going to have at least 11. We've normally had 10 early voting spots, maybe 12. We push the heck out of early voting, understanding that in a presidential primary, a lot of folks are going to wait until election day to see who drops out. But I don't want voters to have the excuse that, oh, well, I didn't have an opportunity. We're trying to cover some areas of the county that we haven't before. And in this election, we tried to cover basically all 6 city council districts so that something's within fairly close proximity to the people who actually can get out and vote.
You sent out some numbers. I just wanted to jump in and point this out to folks watching at home. You sent in some numbers, which I thought were really interesting, and that was, so of the 64,585 people who have voted so far in the city, in this race, about 8,058 of them have taken part in this election. They took part in the 64,500 took part in the 2020 election.
That's correct. I know there are at least 65,000 people that live in the city of Knoxville right now that voted in November of 2020. That tells me they know how to get to the polls. And I don't mean to be a smart aleck about that, but that tells me if voting is important to them, they'll get out and vote. Only 8,000 of those individuals have thus far. So there's obviously a lot of room on election day for folks to get out and cast their
and
ballot.
that's the fallacy, I suppose, that people are very concerned about national politics, and we see that every night, all night, 24/7 on TV, when really the thing that matters most to people right here, who's your school board member, who's your city council person, who's your city mayor, who's your city judge. Those are the things that matter to you day to day, and it's really unfortunate we can't see like numbers.
No, it's disappointing to me. We get phone calls in our office every single day. People are upset about something. You know, I'll give you one example that comes up from 3 or 4 years ago when the St. Mary's closed, and they talked about building a hospital. I believe it was on Middlebrook Pike. We got like 20 phone calls the next day. Who's my city council rep? Who's my county commissioner? Who's the mayor? A lot of times, and this is I'm certainly not editorializing here, but a lot of people don't know the difference between Indy Kincannon and Glenn Jacobs. And until something triggers them, so to speak. And it's people just don't have a good working knowledge of local government. And sometimes I wonder, is that on the educational system? Is that on the candidates? Do we make it too confusing? We try to simplify it at the Election Commission, but we once again have to be nonpartisan, just run it down the middle, and then let folks decide for themselves and let these candidates get out and voice their message.
So how many calls have you got asking if Trump's on the ballot?
None this election.
Okay, I was just curious.
Shocking. I was just going to ask, there are a lot of discussion about having early voting all the way. In other words, you can vote for 3 weeks and up to election day. Has there been discussion about that here?
Not in Knox County. That may be a discussion that has been taken up in the legislature at some point. I will tell you from a practical perspective, that 5-day period between the end of early voting, we need it. We need it to be able to number one, to make sure that everything's ready. In fact, I'm literally in a nice suit today just because it's all I have clean. But I normally I'd be wearing a t-shirt and shorts and moving things around. We have 40 polling places for the city to get ready for. In a county election, it'd be 78, and there's a lot. It's a very large logistics operation, along with making sure that the folks who have early voted and absentee voted don't have a chance to get another bite at the apple on election day, because election security is very important to us, and making sure that everybody gets one vote.
And we do very well at that.
I think we do, yes.
Chris Davis, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this morning. We know you'll be busy on Tuesday, so remind me, 8 to 8,
8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We do not start voting, folks, until 8 o'clock, and I know I'll get a couple of angry phone calls at 7:55. I've got to get to work, open the doors. We can't do that. The other one I'll get somebody who calls me from the parking lot at 8:02 that they weren't able to get in line, and the first question I have for them is what did you not like about early voting. So get out and vote. You have 12 hours. You have to vote in your polling place. knoxvotes.org. I'm sure it'll be up on WBIR.com to where just give us a call. If you don't know this stuff, give us a call. We'll work you through it.
Just a reminder, folks, it's just if you live in the city of Knoxville. We have a graphic as we get ready to go to break. We want to show you in terms of what is on the ballot. As Chris told you, we've got the city mayor's race. It's a primary, but winner could take all if it's 50% plus one of the votes cast for candidates in that, including the incumbent. Same for the city judge. The very same thing would apply. City council, we've got 3 at-large competitive races, contested races, and there it is, Election Day, August 29th. We're going to take a break. You're watching Inside Tennessee. We're coming back with special session thoughts.